Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes. I'm your host, Sean Malone, here with Paul Nelson today. We're sans Jen this afternoon. I guess she had a work thing that she couldn't join us with, and which I find to be kind of depressing, honestly, because we're talking about a movie that I would have probably loved to have had Jen's input on in general.
Yeah. But she probably wouldn't have liked it because it's a comedy. So no.
It's comedy, but it's got things to say, I think, and it's a super interesting movie in any case. But today on the show, we're going to be talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a new film by the A24 studio, which previously brought you films like Green Knight, which we had at least Paul and I disagreed on, I think, to a large extent, but this movie, I don't think we disagree at all. So this is probably going to be a just kind of a love fest for a really, really, really bizarre movie. But before we get into it, Paul, how are you doing, man?
Doing well. It's warming up here in Atlanta. The pollen is abating, and it's pickleball season, baby. We are picking the racket, the paddle back up.
I forgot we did a Discord live event last week, and Paul bailed on us for the Discord live event.
My wife ended up signing me up for some pickleball leagues, and it started that Wednesday night, and so it happens. Schedule conflict. I mean, pickleball. It's a great time. So if you haven't played yet, if you don't even know what pickleball is, just Google it. It's as Paul keeps saying, it's the fastest growing sport. Apparently, tennis.
Honestly,
tennis courts
it seems fun.
Tennis courts are being converted to pickleball courts all over. There's a park near here to where I'm at, and they redid the tennis courts, and instead of keeping them tennis courts, they converted them to pickleball courts. And there seems to be a lot of demand, a growing demand.
It does seem like an awful lot of fun. Instead of playing pickleball, though, I have spent the last weekend buying furniture, which was kind of an insane thing. Just the amount of money you can spend in a very short amount of time trying to furnish a house is shocking. But then also actually getting some of the stuff done in the studio here that I have not been able to do yet. So I finally, after, about a month here, and really 3 months of working on this space, I actually have my drums set up for the first time. So that's pretty exciting. I don't know, nobody, obviously, it's an audio only show, but when Paul and I are talking, we have, video chat on, and so in theory, you might be able to see some symbols and stuff kind of peeking out behind me in the
crash
shot
symbol
there.
Over there.
So I'm working on that. I'm working on just getting the rest of my setup done. This is not going to be timed prior to the show, but I'm also going to be on the Create Unknown podcast with Kevin Lieber of Vsauce 2 and Matt Tabor, who's a good buddy of mine. They're both buddies. But I'm going on that this week. And so I don't know when that podcast is actually going to release, but we're going to record it this week. So it may or may not be out around the same time that this episode gets released. And you will be able to see some of my background in that because they do a video podcast. So we may get there, but anyway, man, the one thing that I'm really, really, really glad that we made time for this weekend is going to see Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a super bizarre movie. We're going to get into all of that in a minute. It stars Michelle Yeoh as Evelyn Kwan Wang and Stephanie Sue as Joy Wang, her daughter. Boy, it's going to be so hard to explain all this stuff. And then Ki Hu Kwan as Waymond Wang, who's her husband. By the way, I had previously, James Hong plays their the grandfather figure. It's Evelyn's father. And what's funny to me is I had just watched the other day, I just watched Big Trouble in Little China. and James Hong is like the old sort of evil spiritual, like, sort of ghost guy in that movie, like this villain in that movie. So I went from that to this, which is like, oh my God, James.
Yeah.
And also because they'd aged up James Hong so much in Big Trouble. So he could play like this geriatric, like ancient 1,000-year-old man or whatever, that like now they kind of merge to me, which was really funny. But man, this movie is directed by Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, who I guess go by the Daniels. They directed a bunch of music videos, including the Turn Down for What music video, and Swiss Army Man, which I've been told to see a million times, and I actually haven't seen it. Paul, have you ever seen Swiss Army Man?
No, I haven't, and I'm sure it's better. It has Harry Potter. Daniel Radcliffe is in the movie.
Yeah, and Paul Dano. It's. I mean, granted, obviously, it seemed weird. I've heard nothing but good things about it, but also, it's like it's a little gross for me, just conceptually, I think. So I don't know. Maybe I should give it a chance. After this movie, especially, I feel like a little compelled to give it a chance. But also, by the way, Turn Down for What? Lil Jon, and we were in the studio last week playing some little
yeah, it all ties together. Yeah,
these things. There's some serendipitous thing happening here where we're just kind of like everything is coming together. But man, this movie is interesting. So, I guess, Paul, I'm going to kick it to you. Can you explain this movie in a non-spoilery way?
Well, no, because I think even the main reason why everything happens is kind of a spoiler. But so the basics is Michelle Yeoh's character, who is married to her Wayman Wang, and
that's super hard to say when you try to say it at once.
It's hard to say, and they run a laundromat, which seems to be somewhat successful. Maybe not that. Just it's a laundromat.
It's going.
Yeah, it's happening day in, day out. And
they live in an apartment above it. It's fine.
Yeah, that's their life, laundry, and they're going through a IRS audit. So laundry and taxes are their life right now. And basically, as the story progresses, it's a very unhappy marriage, and Wayman is about to serve her with divorce papers, and that kind of kicks off the whole day's events. They have to go to the IRS building to talk to Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays a hilarious IRS agent. And there are, I mean, we can't really talk about it, but she is a very successful IRS agent. Let's just put it that way. And their trophy is perfect for what you would think a good IRS agent is.
All right, so I'm gonna try to. This is gonna be tough. We try to keep the show really family friendly. We try to keep the show, relatively PG-13. The trophy that you get if you are a very successful IRS agent is not a very PG-13 trophy, and it is. It looks like another object that has inappropriate uses, let's say. Boy, this is really hard to do.
So far, so good.
And when I saw it, and I imagine when Paul saw it, I thought, my wife turned to me just laughing hysterically, it could not have better summed up the IRS. It was flawless in its conception as a trophy for IRS agents. And it became a little bit of a Chekhov's gun for later use in the film. So
yes, it definitely is a pain in the rear.
A pain in the rear, you might say. Yeah, you might say that that dealing with the IRS is not an enjoyable experience. And this trophy really summed that up in a very clear way. I think It was yeah. Anyway, some of this movie is going to be like this. Like, this is really, really hard to explain. And like, there are aspects of it that are hard to explain sort of a family friendly way, which is funny because I think that this movie is actually at its heart, really a family story.
I guess.
And it's a really good family story. It's, I mean, as Paul said, you know, Wayman wants a divorce, except for when you kind of learn what his reasoning is. He doesn't really want a divorce. He really wants to shake Evelyn up and get her to pay attention, because he really loves her and really wants to make things work. But all she thinks about all the time is just the daily pressures of everything. So again, the laundry, the IRS, her daughter, her father is coming in from China. It's all pressure all the time. And all she can do is just pay attention to the immediate, you know, high intensity stuff. And she's not paying any attention to her husband. She's not really paying attention to the needs and wants of her daughter. Apparently that's been going on for a long time. She's really worried about what her father is going to think about her, because she left China to come to America to be with Wayman, and also to, ended up that they started this business and whatnot, but she's very worried that her father is going to think that she made horrible choices and that she's an embarrassment to the family and all of this kind of stuff. And all of these things are just, it's just pressure. It's pressure everywhere for her. And so, you know, that's the backdrop of what this universe's Evelyn has to deal with. And when she's in this IRS meeting, you know, like talking to Jamie Lee Curtis about the audit, she can't even pay attention. Like, she's struggling to even pay attention because she suddenly has this very, very odd experience. This is where it's gonna, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if we can do this without spoilers. So
yeah,
like,
I think,
well, all right, before we get into this, here's what I will say. Things take a really, really insane turn during this IRS audit. What you need to know, and here's what I'll say, and then Paul, you chime in with like your just core thoughts, and then let's go into spoilers, because I don't know how to do this otherwise. But like, what I will say is that this movie is extremely creative. It's extremely inventive. It's one of the most unique and original movies I've ever seen my entire life. Visually, it's stunning. Like, there's all kinds of cool things that they're doing to accentuate the story of the film. And the story is like just unhinged. It's completely wild. And yet, like I said, at the core of it, it's really about finding meaning in your life. And it's really about connecting with the people who matter in a way that doesn't have to be, you know, I hadn't really thought about this until just now, but like, some of this movie is also FOMO, right? Like, it's fear of missing out. It's like, here are all of the paths that your life could take. And it could have gone down this road and this road and this road and this road. And every decision you make, you know, branches off into some other possible future. And what if you pick the wrong one and all this kind of stuff? And this movie is really, a lot of this movie is about accepting that you made choices and that you should try to live in the present with those choices and like enjoy the little things in life instead of being constantly afraid that you could have done something else. And so for me, it has really great characters, really interesting story, really good message. And I really would recommend this to just about everybody. There's some stuff that's inappropriate for younger people, but like, I don't know. I mean, I would have, honestly, if I had kids that were like 16, I would have taken this movie. I think it would have been fine. But
yeah. I think late high school would be fine. I don't see anything.
Yeah.
That would be anything worse than, I mean, when I was in high school, Superbad came out, and I would say that's more.
Oh, for sure. I think this movie is not only like probably less in terms of its sort of raunchiness, let's call, I don't know how to, you know, whatever, than Superbad, but also a much better film, and like one that's worth.
It's not raunchy for the sake of being raunchy. I wouldn't even consider, this is not even close to being raunchy, but no, I think just this movie, without getting into spoilers, because I do think more people should see this. If you're listening to this movie is one of my favorite movies I've seen in a long time, maybe ever. It takes an idea that is quickly becoming a very bad trope, and specifically with superhero movies, and absolutely knocks it out of the park. And it actually makes sense and twists it in a way that's not just for the quick member berries or anything like that, like you see most of the time, or just lazy storytelling. It actually is there for a reason and makes you think about things in a different way. The characters are great. Last week we talked about Dumbledore, the secrets of Dumbledore, and having a gay character and this movie has a gay character, but it actually is a part of the character, not just thrown in for window dressing, and actually has something to do with the plot, but not in a way that is 2022 or anything like that. It's just a mother and a daughter trying to connect, even though they're very different people. And
so one of the questions we had sort of prepped with a little bit here was like the idea of whether or not this is like a woke movie. And it's odd to me, I think, because I feel like there's a lot of instances, and we see this a lot in Disney, Marvel, like all this kind of stuff, where you see like the inclusion of a gay character or a character that is, like trans or something like that it's so transparently the movie studio trying to score points with a certain demographic and with like Hollywood in general, right? This not only doesn't feel like that in any way, right? But it also the fact that her daughter is lesbian matters to the story, because it's part of what, like when Evelyn's father is coming from China. Evelyn already has just a ton of baggage trying to connect with her father and make her father proud of her and get her father's approval and all this kind of stuff. And of course, China is very, anti-gay in a lot of ways. And there are a lot of people in China that are very, very, I don't even really like using the word traditional, but you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of people in China who do not accept this at all. Right. And thus why The Secrets of Dumbledore omits all of that content for its Chinese release. Right. So, I mean, that, by the way, that's the other thing, like as a little bit of an aside, like you could not show this movie in China because it's not like the fact that the daughter is lesbian is not like, as Paul said, window dressing. It's not incidental to the story in such a thinly veiled way that you could literally just take it out for a Chinese release. You can't take it out for a Chinese release. It's inherent to the story, because part of the point is that Evelyn is dismissing her daughter's relationship, not even because she doesn't like it or doesn't approve herself per se, but because she's worried that how that's going to reflect on her relationship with her father. And so when her father comes in, she's like trying to introduce, Joy's girlfriend, Becky. She's trying to introduce Becky, and she's like, she's a good friend. And it's like, yeah. So at once she's like lying to her father and also like really deeply disrespecting her daughter's relationship, and so that has all kinds of implications for the way that these characters relate to each other. And again, that's not just window dressing, and it's not, and also there's nothing about it. Like when I think of woke movies and when we talk about that, I think of movies that really like throw politics in your face, movies that like try to force you to get on board with a particular ideology. And there's nothing here that is like, there's no like aggressive promotion of identity politics. There's no political speeches. There's no like even the daughter, who in this case would have every right to sort of stand up and say something like, look, you homophobe, whatever, doesn't even do that. Because she's actually going like, you're my mom. I want my mom to care about the things I care about.
Right.
And you don't, and so it's not this. Yeah. I don't know. It's amazing to me when that stuff is handled really well. which it is in this case. Like, you don't get that sense of like political activism behind it. You don't get the sense that it was studio notes. Oh, let's just drop in a line here. Let's do like the girl power scene in Endgame or whatever. It doesn't matter if all these characters are on completely opposite ends of where we've geographically established them to be. Let's just make sure they all show up here for this one moment so we can have this cool, like, that's manipulation, right? Like, that's not storytelling. That's not good, thoughtful storytelling. And this is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we pretty much hit the point where it's hard to talk about what happens without spoilers. Yeah. So I guess now is a good time. Like, this is be spoilers from here on out for sure. Yep.
Sorry, everybody, if you look, I don't know. I mean, I also kind of feel like we're going to spoil a lot of stuff about this movie, but this movie is also amazing and it's worth watching regardless of whether or not you've heard this stuff. But I get it. If you want to bounce now and go watch it, totally understand. All right. So yeah. So Evelyn is on her way up in the elevator to this IRS appointment for the audit, and Waymond suddenly, for completely inexplicable reasons, pulls out an umbrella, pops it open, shields the cameras, shields him and Evelyn from the cameras, and then as if to be a completely different person, announces that she is essentially the chosen one who needs to learn very, very quickly, needs to learn how to hop her mind from universe to universe to universe. There's an infinite universes, infinite realities, multiverse of Evelyns, all of whom have taken very different paths in life. And because there is a horrible evil coming to wipe out all of the Evelyns in the universe, and she needs to basically learn this crash course. She needs to learn how to defend herself against, Jobu Tupaki is the character that we learn. This is obviously like a complete left turn for Evelyn. It shakes her out of like understanding what the heck is going on. It distracts her from her appointment with the tax auditor and everything else. But this immediately gets out of hand when like another version of Jamie Lee Curtis's tax auditor like sort of inhabits her body and attacks. And so this, like, the next, like, the majority of the movie, like, the movie is broken up into essentially 3 chapters. And the first is like Evelyn's just constant battle to,
deal with everything,
pay attention to life. It's everything, right? But then the second chapter is Everywhere, which is like all of Evelyn's like learning how to sort of connect with other Evelyns in different universes and battle, this sort of relentless attack from Jobu Tupaki, who, I guess I'll just say, it turns out to be the alternate universe version of Joy, her daughter.
Her daughter, yeah.
And then also attacks from like other characters that like inhabit the film while being trained by this alternate, way more heroic, way more like tough version of her husband, Waymond. Right. So it's the kind of premise that allows you to do incredibly creative things, but which I think could have easily fallen on its face. Like a less creative team, a less creative studio, a studio that was like maybe more interested in the nostalgia, or like, I mean, gosh, I hate to make some of these comparisons, but like we're about to go into like Doctor Strange, like Multiverse of Madness, even Spider-Man, stuff like that, is like Spider-Man played all that stuff for nostalgia bait, right? And it worked and it was cool, whatever, fine. But like this movie plays it for narrative significance and humor, frankly. Mm-hmm. Like there's an awful lot, like there's a universe where people just, for whatever reason, developed fingers that look like hot dogs and that act like hot dogs.
And they had a whole scene mocking Planet of the Apes where the opposable thumb apes lost to the hot dog finger apes.
The hot dog finger apes. And so like, millions of years ago, the hominids diverged, and the hot dog fingered ones won the evolutionary battle.
Right.
My gosh. It's insanity. And then of course later on we find out in that universe that's a universe where Evelyn and Jamie Lee Curtis's tax auditor character are in a relationship. And so they're like dancing with each other with hot dog fingers. I mean, there are things like that, which are just so wild and inventive and insane. But when you have alternate universes and you really are taking it seriously, that you've got infinite possibilities, like it actually becomes a lot more like Rick and Morty is sort of like interdimensional cable, which is kind of where this goes to some extent. Like things get really, there's a universe where Joy and Evelyn, where life never developed on Earth, and they're just rocks sitting at the edge of a canyon and having a conversation in text on screen. It is so bonkers. And it's all about nihilism, and it's all about finding meaning. And like, if the universe is so vast, and if there are infinite versions, then what does any of this matter at all? Right. And like the whole scene with them as rocks is like, we're insignificant, and all science is going to do is show us some other newer way in which we're even more insignificant and have even less significance to the trajectory of the universe or multiple universes and whatever. And so the movie ultimately is really about like, how do you get rid of that sense of despair and anxiety that comes from this feeling that everything is overwhelming, but also nothing matters. And how do you find meaning in the life that you actually have? Like that's right. That's heavy, but it's really, really well done. So I don't know, man. Like, what are your, I don't know. Just take it from there. Like, what do you want to talk about? Man, there's just so much.
There's a lot to talk. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that this was a live action Rick and Morty, but the difference is that Rick and Morty, I enjoy it. Yeah, it's a great cartoon, but it's pretty one note. I think they fall on the side of everything doesn't matter. Yeah. And that's the joke. While this takes the complete opposite approach, where you reject nihilism, reject that you don't matter. Your choices, you made these choices for a reason, and life is in the end good and precious. And it's very refreshing in 2022. And we get asked questions all the time about different movies. Is it woke? Is it not woke? That's kind of what people want to know. And I think this is a rejection of our current culture, just flat out on its face. Our current culture is very nihilistic. It's nothing matters. You have no control over your life. If you're born this way, then you're going to be stuck in this situation for no fault of your own. And this absolutely rejects that. And it's not subtle. It's literally, like Sean says, in some scenes, text on screen about it. And it is, like I said, so refreshing. And I mean, it's funny. Very funny. The scenes
it's extremely funny.
With the award might have been the hardest I've laughed in years. But it's not just funny and not just slapstick. It is also deeply touching. And there was a point, my wife makes fun of me because I don't cry. And it's just like, when I do cry, it's like, oh, I'd make a little face or something like that. I got to that point. It made me laugh and almost actually cry a human tear. But it is fascinating to watch.
Dude, I cry at movies all the time, actually, but I don't cry for sad stuff. Like I don't. Right. I don't find. First of all, I don't. What I cry about in movies, what brings a tear to my eye, is always like. It's always like joy. It's love. It's like heroism. It's people doing good things for other people for good reasons a lot of the time. And so there's a bunch of stuff in this movie where you're just like, like just being able to empathize with various versions of Wayman, and especially he has kind of a speech at the end, and where a version of him inhabits a universe with a version of Evelyn that's like a martial arts master. And she ends up being like a Bruce Lee kind of character, where she's like she's a movie star
with her pinkies.
With her pinkies, yeah. She's like got the ability to, one finger punch, but with like a pinky, and can blow people away. And it's all very like, I mean, the Michelle Yeoh connection also, but it's like very Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and all that kind of stuff. And it's fine, right? Like all that stuff is played for, for the action scenes, but also for the humor of it. But like, she's like I said, she's a very Bruce Lee character. And that's a universe in which she never met. Well, she did meet Wayman, but instead of when she had a choice to run away with him, leave China, go to America, etc., she chose to stay. And then when she chose to stay, she got mugged at some point, and then she decided to learn probably Wing Chun and become this huge martial artist, whatever. And so that was like the divergent path that her life took. But at one of her movie premieres, she runs into the modern version of Wayman, who's also still in China and who is now seemingly a pretty successful guy. Mm-hmm. It's unclear. I don't think they ever actually say what he does for a living. But they both without each other, both went off and had very successful lives. And, that is in sharp contrast to the much more mundane and boring life of laundry and taxes that she and Wayman created together. Right. And so, but he's talking to her about how he kind of gets made fun of for being nice, and how and this is like a running theme and throughout the movie. Like she makes fun of him a little bit because he's going to bring cookies to the IRS office. And she's like, why are you bringing her cookies? She's auditing us. Like, she's the bad guy. Like, why are we doing this? And he just sort of brushes it off. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to bring her cookies. She likes the cookies, And as this keeps progressing throughout the movie, like, we just keep seeing Wayman as really the antithesis of the Joy character, who has just completely lost faith in herself, in humanity, in reality, and is just totally nihilistic. And she can't do anything. She's so sort of stuck in this world of thinking that nothing matters, where Wayman is the one who's constantly saying, like, we're here. This is what matters. Like, the stuff that we're doing today and with each other matters. And man, that speech for me, like, when he actually gets back into it and says, like, everybody thinks that I'm weak. Everybody thinks that I don't fight, but this is how I fight. I fight with kindness. And that's the freaking lesson. It's like the lesson of the movie. It's like, once we're into the third act and she has this moment to try to essentially rescue Joy from the great bagel.
The everything bagel.
She created, oh, this is so genius, man. Joy creates like this everything bagel, and she's like, when you really put everything on it, it like basically turns into a black hole.
That's just the universe eating everything bagel.
A universe eating everything bagel, and it turns into a religion. It's just, oh my goodness, this movie is insane. It's such a good way. But she's trying to rescue Joy from basically just jumping into the void of nothingness. And she's fighting all of these people physically because she has all these powers that she's been able to obtain from other versions of herself. And it's Wayman who says, enough of the fighting. We can't just keep beating each other up. Like, you have to be kind. Just try to be kind. And she completely shifts the way that she fights. And so instead of like punching people and trying to like beat them to death, she touches them and figures out what version of them they love, or what aspects about them that they want, and then reaches into these other universes and pulls those things into their reality. And then everybody she leaves in her wake is now like a happier person, which is such, I mean, my God, like, that's an incredible story, like an incredible lesson. And it's just so, I think you're dead on, man. Like it's so at odds with what we see in most every other story that we watch, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Is the prevailing narrative in our culture today is it's always fighting. I mean, we're going to talk about Twitter and all the ongoing drama in the supporters episode, but man, that is, it's just like we were saying, just the complete opposite. You fight with kindness, and in the end, you'll leave people better after you leave them. And I mean, there's so many gags that are by themselves to be the funniest part of any other movie, like Raccacoonie. But then you just kind of forget that. I mean, it's just this movie is so smart on every level, and I can't say enough good things about it. It's from the laundry and taxes being the constant throughout all universes. I mean, it's basing it off of that, and having laundry and taxes being the most mundane Evelyn version ever in every universe is
she gets
perfect.
Lectured about how she is the worst version of herself.
You're the most unremarkable.
Essentially, she is the one because she is the absolute worst. There's nothing remarkable about her whatsoever. And so as a result, she has the ability to take on what is remarkable about everybody else. Oh man, this is brutal. She's sitting there going like, well, I can't be like the literal worst, right? It's like, no, you're actually the worst.
Yeah.
You're actually the worst one. But oh my God, Raccacoonie, man, and that's a joke that just set up and pay off, man.
Yes.
This movie is so well written.
Yeah. They set something up. They're going to pay it off at the end. And they did every single time. And in ways that are shocking and sometimes pixelated.
That's sometimes pixelated. That's a thing. I think that's, it's something that I think I mentioned in, it was either in one of the bonus episodes or it was in one of our Discord conversations recently, but I talked about something that Brandon Sanderson said about sort of subverting expectations and surprises. And it's like, this movie is just full of subverted expectations, but every single one of those subversions is better and funnier than I expected it to be. Like every bit of it, where I would have, like, just on the surface, you go, okay, they're going this direction. They take a wild turn, but that turn is so much more inventive and funnier and smarter than you would have probably imagined them to do. And so what Brandon Sanderson had said about all of that was like, there's nothing like people really love surprises if the surprise is better than they wanted, right? Like if you ask for a bicycle and you give them like a hoverboard, they'll be like, oh man, this is way better than what I thought. But like, I mean, like, Back to the Future hoverboard, sorry, not a dumb toy, like scooter thing. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like, you ask for a car and you get, a Corvette or something. It's like, wow, that's way better. That's a better surprise than I thought. But when you subvert expectations and everything is just meant to be, just different, and the surprise is unexpected and worse, people really hate you for it. This movie is filled with good surprises. Just constantly great surprises. God, man.
Yeah. And what I'm interested really is, I hear a lot of complaints about there's just no movies for adults that make you think, that that aren't just comic book movies and stuff like that. This is a movie for adults. Obviously there's some comic book-esque storylines, but I think they do it for a purpose. They use that as a way to kind of mock our current movie culture. Yeah. But what was fascinating to me, so I with the family situation with, kids and all that stuff, basically the only time I really have a chance to go to watch movies is kind of middle of the afternoon on weekdays, which it sounds great in theory, but it's really not usually that great because you're usually by yourself or anything like that. And so I'm expecting to go into this, sit there in a room by myself, but I get in there and I had ordered my ticket a few days before and I had looked on the seating chart, but it was full.
Wow.
It was like, I was shocked, and it was based on the time. It was a bunch of older people, but I was absolutely taken back by the amount of people that were in the theater at that time of day. And I mean, it's not surprising. I think the word of mouth on this, it's continued to grow. I mean, it's had a very long release. They opened it only in New York, LA, maybe DC. And it just, each week it's getting bigger and bigger. And I'm not sure how much longer it'll be in theaters, but if it is in your area, go watch it. It's worth the money. It's worth the trip.
It's going to be worth whenever it's on streaming. Like, get to it quickly. I mean, like like if you can rent it or if you can, buy it VOD, like do.
Yeah. We rarely give recommendations like this for movies. I feel like there's been, when was the last one that we were, you go spend
I literally
money.
Can't remember. I honestly can't remember.
Fat Man, maybe. Has it
Fat
been
Man.
that long?
Possibly Fat Man. No, I honestly, I don't know. We need like Matt Hampton to like review the tape. We need to
go back to the scorecard. Yeah, no,
dude, I don't know, but yeah, this is. I am desperate to hear Jen's take on this too, because I really want to hear what she has to say once she actually gets to see it. I will be bummed out if she didn't actually end up watching it just because of like other obligations and stuff. Knowing that you're not going to be called on to talk about it kind of changes the game in terms of like whether or not you make time for stuff. But like, oh man, yeah, I really hope everybody sees it. This also for me, like A24, I've talked about this before. A24 is a fascinating studio to me. Like there are several of their films that I don't care for. Again, we had talked about Green Knight, and Jen and I didn't particularly like Green Knight at all. But there's a lot of what they've done is sort of like, I don't know, when it's hit or miss for me, but when they're hits, they are really, really big hits. And I just think they're just phenomenal films. And this is one of those. This is one of these where you look at it and you go, wow, that is just nailed it on every possible level. And so, yeah, man, I hope that I don't know. And the other thing too, I was actually going to say something as well. I think part of the problem with like the whole adult film concept is that when you want a really intelligent film, a lot of the time you are forced into a very boring film.
Right.
And so like, yes, they make movies for adults, quote unquote, but they're movies like Power of the Dog, where you're like, I don't want to watch that because it's long and slow and
usually sad
and not that much happens that's very interesting, only for a couple really standout scenes perhaps. And even those standout scenes are probably going to tell you something horrible about the state of existence or whatever. This movie is smart and interesting and has a lot of really good things to say about what I think is probably one of the most important issues anybody could be talking about right now, which is really that nihilism versus meaning battle that's kind of going on in our culture right now. And it has good things to say about it. Like it has smart things to say about it. And it does so in such a ludicrously entertaining way. Just more like this, please.
Right.
More of these. I mean, this is just nonstop great surprises for me. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think let's maybe wrap it up there, Paul. I mean, I don't know that we need to do a star rating here, but let's
full star.
Final thoughts here.
Full star. I mean, it's one of the best movies I've seen. Like I said earlier, of all time. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but oh my gosh, I cannot wait to watch this again. And I think this is going to be a cult classic because not only is it just funny, but there are this will pay off with repeat viewings because you'll pick up on little things, little callbacks. Because I mean, we talked about Ratatouille. I mean, it's just Ratatouille, but a raccoon. But that's a pretty big one and in your face. And
that's a really good joke payoff also.
Right.
Like,
but so they wear their influences. Their influences are there on screen, but they're not like, oh, you remember this?
Right.
So it's I cannot wait to watch it again.
That's such a good example, by the way, of how to do referential humor without making it just be Family Guy. Remember this, remember this, remember this. Like, this isn't Remember Ratatouille. This is your mom misremembered something because she's an old mom who didn't really pay attention when you were 5 watching Ratatouille. I didn't really understand what was going on. And then paid off in like just the greatest multiverse sort of way you could think of. But like, yeah, dude, full star. Absolutely go watch this as soon as humanly possible. And the other reason why I think it's going to pay off in repeat viewings is because there are, like, as you get deeper and deeper into her sort of fracturing into all these multiple versions, there are a lot of like music video level sort of quick cuts to like a million different versions of Evelyn. And I honestly, I want to go through that and just watch that sequence or those kinds of sequences again a few times just to see like, what's the connection, you know, like what other references are in there. Cause there are going to be some interesting ones. Cause I imagine they put the same level of thought into each one of those frames as they put into everything else. So yeah. And it's going to make me probably want to watch Swiss Army Man. I mean, I've put it off, but I feel like if this is what we're working with, I think it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you're a supporter of Out of Frame on Patreon or Subscribestar, definitely not exactly stick around. We've got another episode we're going to do where we're going to be talking about Elon Musk and his Twitter acquisition, which seems to be the big news for today, which is very, very exciting. And interesting subject to cover. If you're not a subscriber, consider kicking us like $1 or $2 a month. It'll get you access to the bonus episodes of Behind the Scenes. It'll get you access to the private server or the private room, group, whatever, on Discord. Join our Discord if you want to continue on in these conversations anyway. But like, it's just, we do bonus stuff all the time, and it's going to be awesome for you to kick in. And of course, we appreciate anything that you can do to make Out of Frame and Behind the Scenes possible. So thanks everybody so much for listening. Give us a shout out, rating, review, whatever on podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, all those things. And we'll see you next time.